Starting off the list at number 10, we have International Karate Plus. If you're talking about Commodore 64 games that are still ridiculously fun today, this game has to be in the conversation. Released in 1987, it took the fighting game formula and gave it a twist. Instead of simply facing one opponent, you're thrown into an arena with two opponents at the same time. That changes everything. You're constantly watching where everyone is, trying to land your attacks while avoiding getting caught from behind. And the controls are incredibly responsive for a C64 game. You have punches, kicks, jumps, and a range of different moves. But the real fun comes from learning how to use them together. Once you get into the rhythm, fights can become surprisingly fast and chaotic. There's also something about the presentation that makes it great. The bright backgrounds, the hilarious animations, and that unmistakable C64 sound all come together perfectly. It doesn't need a big story or complicated mechanics. You can pick it up, start a fight, and immediately understand why it's fun. And when you've got another person sitting next to you, it becomes even better. It's simple, competitive, incredibly playable, and one of the C64's great multiplayer experiences, and that's why it takes the number 10 spot. At number 9, we have a game that arrived surprisingly late in the Commodore's life, Mayhem in Monsterland. It was released in 1993, at a time when most people had already moved on to newer hardware, but instead of treating the C64 like an old machine, the developers pushed it incredibly hard. You play as Mayhem, a yellow triceratops travelling through colourful worlds filled with enemies, platforms, obstacles and plenty of secrets. At first it looks like a straightforward platformer, but the speed and smoothness of the game are what really made the game amazing. Mayhem moves quickly and the levels have a great sense of flow. You're running, jumping, collecting magic dust and trying to keep your momentum going without getting caught by various hazards along the way. And visually, it's one of those games that make you look at the C64 and think, how did they get this out of the machine? The colourful graphics and detailed environments are impressive enough, but it's the overall polish that makes it special. Mayhem in Monsterland feels like a celebration of what the C64 was still capable of nearing the end of its commercial life. It arrived years after the machine's glory days, yet somehow managed to remind everyone that there was still life left in it. Coming in at number 8 is Armalite, and if you're a fan of shoot 'em ups, this is one C64 game you really need to know. Released in 1988, it takes you into a hostile world packed with enemy ships, projectiles and enormous obstacles, and it doesn't waste much time easing you into the action. The first thing you'll notice is the speed. Everything moves quickly, but the game still feels remarkably smooth. You need fast reactions, but mesmerising enemy patterns and learning the level is just as important. Your ship can also be upgraded as you progress, with weapons and energy improvements, helping you survive longer and take on increasingly difficult enemies. The C64 was never supposed to be able to compete with some of the more powerful machines of the era, yet games like this show just how much could be achieved with clever programming. The backgrounds, scrolling and enemy movement all combine to create a game that feels much bigger than the hardware would suggest, and it's difficult. But that's part of the appeal. Every failed attempt teaches you something, and when you finally get further than you did before, it feels earned. For pure arcade-style action and technical achievement, it deserves its place among the C64's finest. Coming in at number 7 is Bubble Bobble. It might look simple, but underneath those cute characters is one incredibly addictive game. Your job is to clear each screen of enemies by trapping them inside bubbles. Once you've caught an enemy, you need to burst the bubble before it escapes, and that's where the fun begins. The levels become progressively more difficult, with enemies moving faster and layouts becoming trickier. You have to think about where you're standing, where the bubbles are going, and how you're going to reach them before they disappear. But Bubble Bobble's biggest strength has always been playing with another person. 2 players working together can clear screens much faster, but things can also get hilariously chaotic. You might be trying to help your partner while accidentally getting in their way, or racing to grab the points from an enemy you've both just trapped. The C64 version does a fantastic job of bringing that arcade experience home, and beneath all the colourful graphics and cheerful music is a game with plenty of depth. There are secrets, hidden features and plenty of reasons to keep coming back. Bubble Bobble isn't just a great conversion, it's one of those games that can sit down next to you for 5 minutes and somehow keep you playing for hours. Taking the number 6 spot is Whizball, one of the most imaginative games in the entire C64 library. You play as a wizard who shrinks himself and climbs inside the Whizball, setting out to restore colour to a world that has been drained by the evil Zark. That sounds strange enough, but playing Whizball is even stranger. You fly around scrolling landscapes, collecting coloured droplets while avoiding enemies and obstacles. The goal is to gradually restore colour to each section of the world. The gameplay is unusual, the visuals have a distinctive style, and the soundtrack by Martin Galway is one of the most recognisable pieces of C64 music ever produced. But Whizball isn't an easy game. It takes some time to understand exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and the controls can feel unusual at first. Once everything clicks though, there's a real sense of satisfaction in gradually bringing the world back to life. It's also a great example of how developers on the C64 weren't simply copying arcade games, they were creating ideas that were genuinely different. Whizball has personality, you can see it, hear it and feel it from the moment you start playing. And when you look back at the big library of C64 games, there aren't many that feel quite like it. At number 5 we have something completely different, Elite. This game wasn't about running from left to right, shooting everything on screen or completing a series of fixed levels, it gave you an entire galaxy. Elite came to the Commodore 64 in 1985, putting you in control of a small spacecraft and essentially telling you to figure things out for yourself. You could trade goods between planets, fight other ships, explore the galaxy and gradually improve your equipment. And the sheer ambition of that idea on a Commodore 64 is incredible. This wasn't a game that lasted a few hours and then ended. You could spend enormous amounts of time building up your ship and working your way towards becoming an elite pilot. The wireframe graphics might look simple by today's standards, but at the time they helped create the feeling that you were travelling through a massive 3-dimensional universe. There was also a real sense of freedom. You weren't constantly being told what to do. You decided where to go, what to trade and how much danger you were willing to take. That freedom is a big part of why Elite became so influential. It showed that a home computer could deliver an experience that felt almost limitless. For ambition, innovation and sheer scale, Elite is unquestionably one of the Commodore 64's greatest achievements. Coming in at number 4, we have Turrican 2, The Final Fight. If you want an example of just how far developers could push the C64, this is it. Turrican 2 puts you in control of a heavily armed Turrican, travelling through a series of enormous levels filled with enemies, traps, platforms and hidden areas. And this isn't a slow-paced platformer. The game gives you a big amount of freedom to explore. You can run, jump, shoot, transform into your gyroscope form and discover areas that aren't immediately obvious. The levels are packed with detail and the game constantly gives you new things to see and new challenges to overcome. But one of the most impressive things about Turrican 2 is the feeling of scale. The levels seem enormous, the action is constantly changing and the C64 is being pushed incredibly hard to keep everything moving. Turrican 2 is one of those games where the technical achievement is impressive, but you don't have to think about the technology while you're playing it. It simply feels like a great action game. That's what makes it a masterpiece. It combines exploration, combat, platforming, music and technical wizardry into one unforgettable package. At number 3 is one of the most iconic games ever created for the Commodore 64, Impossible Mission. Released in 1984, the game puts you in the role of an agent breaking into a heavily secured facility. But instead of simply shooting your way through the building, you're searching rooms, examining furniture and trying to find the pieces of a code that will stop the professor. The atmosphere is fantastic. The dark rooms, the robotic enemies and the constant feeling that something could go wrong make the whole game feel tense. And then there's the voice. That famous line, "Stay a while, stay forever," was astonishing for a home computer at the time.
Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever.
The animation is also remarkable. Your character moves with a smoothness that immediately made Impossible Mission stand out from many other C64 games, but what really keeps it interesting is the exploration. You have to search, experiment and remember where you've found useful information. It's not simply about having quick reflexes, you actually have to think. And every time you start a new game, the experience can feel different because the puzzle elements are rearranged. Impossible Mission is one of those rare games where the technology, atmosphere and gameplay all work together perfectly. It didn't just show what the C64 could do, it created an experience that people still remember decades later. At number 2 is The Last Ninja 2, a game that for many C64 owners represents the machine at its absolute best. Released in 1988, it takes The Last Ninja into modern day New York, creating a very different setting from the original game. You play as the ninja Armakuni, moving through streets, parks, buildings and other environments while fighting enemies and searching for your way forward. But what makes The Last Ninja 2 so great isn't just the combat, it's the atmosphere. The isometric perspective gives the game a distinctive look, and the environments feel like places you're actually exploring rather than simply levels you need to get through. There's also a surprising amount of variety. You're fighting enemies, solving puzzles, finding objects and figuring out where you need to go next. And then we have the soundtrack by Matt Gray. It is another big part of what makes The Last Ninja 2 so amazing, giving the game an atmosphere that is difficult to separate from the experience itself. The Last Ninja 2 also feels incredibly ambitious for its hardware. The graphics are detailed, the environments are large, and the whole thing has a sense of adventure that very few C64 games manage to capture. It isn't perfect, and some of the gameplay can be frustrating, but when you look at the complete package, it's hard to deny its importance. The Last Ninja 2 isn't simply one of the best C64 games, it's one of the games that helped define what the Commodore 64 could be, and that's why it takes the number 2 spot. And finally at number 1 we have Paradroid. There are plenty of games that could have taken the number 1 spot, but Paradroid is one that to me best represents the creativity and ingenuity of Commodore 64 gaming. Released in 1985, it puts you aboard a massive spacecraft filled with hostile robots. Your tiny ship is seriously outmatched, so simply blasting everything inside isn't going to get you very far. Instead, it gives you one brilliant idea: you can take control of other robots. When you encounter another droid, you can initiate a control battle and try and take over its systems. If you're successful, you're suddenly controlling a more powerful machine. That simple mechanic completely changes the way you approach the game. You're constantly thinking about which robots you can defeat, which ones you should avoid, and how much power you have available. The ship itself is also fascinating to explore. Different decks are filled with different droids, and the whole thing feels like one interconnected environment rather than a collection of traditional levels. And that's what makes it so special. It doesn't rely on flashy presentation or a big amount of story. It takes a brilliant gameplay idea and builds an entire experience around it. It's clever, addictive and completely suited to the Commodore 64. For originality, gameplay and sheer cleverness, Paradroid is my number 1. And there we have it, 10 Commodore 64 masterpieces. From the technical brilliance of Paradroid and Turrican 2, to the atmosphere of The Last Ninja 2, and the sheer originality of Whizball, these games show just how much the Commodore 64 was capable of. And of course there are plenty of great C64 games that didn't make this list. What would you put in your top 10? Let me know in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.